Okay, welcome to Overview Overwatch. This is a channel where I get to sit down with some members of the Overwatch community and just get to pick their brains with some questions I have about the scene. So today I'm joined by Kevh, General Manager of Oblivione. Kevh, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm Kev, the general manager for Oblivione. I'm 23 years old and half Dutch, half Filipino, but raised in Belgium.
Brilliant. Now, before we go any further, I have to ask, who is your main?
It's been a very long time since I actually played myself, outside of just playing casually now. But when I did used to play competitively, I played Lucia and Moira, which was back in Goat's meta.
Okay, you're actually the second Lucio main. So, do you have any thoughts on balance for Lucio? Do you think he's in a good place? Does he need any changes?
I think Lucio's like pretty fine right now. I don't think he's gonna need any tweaking anytime soon. Moira, on the other hand, might I don't know, she might need some changes, maybe like a complete rework even. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just to get her a little bit more prevalent, I suppose, in the meta.
Yep.
Yeah, fair, fair. Okay, so I want to start by just talking about you and your role then as a manager. So, how did you get into the position you're in right now as manager of XO? And was managing something you always wanted to do, or did it kind of just fall upon you?
It kind of happened. I didn't intend to become a manager because matter of fact, I didn't even want to get into Overwatch at all.
Okay.
I was just like from the very beginning, I was just scrolling through Facebook and I saw an advertisement for a Belgian community on Discord, and I clicked on it without even realizing what game it was for, and it turned out to be Overwatch. And that was the day where I picked up Overwatch again and actually tried to get on that team, where I ended up, well, starting off as a player first, then as a captain. And sooner or later, we realized that the competitive scene is way bigger than we imagined. Because all we used to do back then was just scrim in like quick play or competitive as a six stack. And then I found out about scrims and all of that stuff and contenders in the Overwatch League, and it just fascinated me so much. So we went to look for a way to get there, and then we found a coach who decided to pick us up and create his own team where I was a starting player. And whilst everyone else was progressing, I was slowly lacking behind, according to them. And we came to the mutual agreement that I would be better off as a manager. And since they didn't have one, I could start right there.
Okay.
And ever since then, I've just been managing. Yeah.
Well, and any of those people that you kind of mentioned back then, any of them still around in the competitive scene? We might know names or.
Well, Rene wasn't one of them. He has retired quite a while ago, but yeah, he was also on the Belgian team despite being British.
Okay.
But he has stuck with us for a very long time, throughout Ex Oblivione as well, for at least a couple of years. Yeah.
Very good, very good. So again, just before we get into EXO too much here, just talking about managing, in your opinion, what makes a good manager then?
Flexibility, 100%. You need to be able to flex, like be as flexible as you can be in terms of what your team requires. Um, if your coach wants you to book scrims with certain teams and certain teams only, you need to be ready to adapt to that and change your schedule if needed, even if that means canceling scrims and possibly risking not getting a replacement scrim. Communication and structure kind of go hand in hand in that sense. If you can't communicate with your coach or with the players, or I guess in that sense, for me, even like our social media team, you're the one that's keeping everything together, not necessarily pulling the strings, but making sure that everything can be as stable as possible. Definitely.
And on that, then, do you think managers are an undervalued role in the scene as a whole, or do you feel like you guys are valued by, say, your players and the rest of the community?
I don't know if I could call it undervalued, but I can definitely see why people would do so, like why people would call it undervalued. But I think that's a bit too harsh. I think it more so comes from people not realizing what a manager is actually responsible for and their actual tasks. Because especially in like the lower tiers, all you see them do is book scrims or occasionally like deal with some administration which is just simply signing up for a tournament and getting all of your players to click a link. And like, not even all teams set up a schedule for scrims. Like, I've seen many teams just write it in a Discord channel, like, hey, you guys have a scrim tomorrow from this time to this time, and then that's it. So I can kind of see why people say it's undervalued, but also like I feel like they're kind of putting it on themselves.
Yeah,
So
and just on that then, what do you think is sort of the largest difference that separates these people who, say, are your scrim bots and your very limited admin to, say, some of the work that you would do at the tier 2 level?
well, obviously in Contenders we do have a lot more opportunity to deal with administration. Like, we do get to be in contact with Blizzards, and like, it's just in general a lot more professional. I prefer a more professional environment. But also just, we're constantly on the look for things to do. Like, for example, I make sure I attend like at least 90% of scrims, even though like all I can do there is like record the VOD. I still do it, even if I know that like there's a very big chance that they're not going to make use of it. But in the case that they do, it's obviously going to be of benefit to them, so I do it.
Okay, brilliant. So on that then again, do you have any advice for people who are managing these teams then in tier 3 or below?
Outside of trying to like open yourself up for new tasks and new challenges within a team, connections are also like very, very important. Whether it's just knowing a player that's already in Contenders or is maybe soon to become Contenders. Easiest example is if you're on a team that's like tier 3, or like, I don't know, close to reaching the next tier, basically. If one of your players gets picked up, like, stay in contact with them, especially if you're good friends, which I assume, then they can always talk you into the next scene. And again, like I mentioned previously, just being very flexible for your team. Like, if your team needs anything and you could do it, just go for it. Like,
Yeah.
keep yourself open for it.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so all this talk about teams then. For anyone not familiar then with the Oblivione team, could you talk a little bit about, say, I know you mentioned where you came from, but say the team itself and their backgrounds. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. So after we were picked up by that coach back then, called Simjang, me and Renee decided to split ways, split apart afterwards. And we started, actually, no, it was still together with Simjang at the time. We created the team Ex Oblivione back in 2019, where we just held open tryouts. We were still just a tier 3 team, or not even tier 3. We didn't even have access to the OW's tier 3 scene. And we just hosted open tryouts there. And that's where our first tryouts were actually, Doge. Doge was on our first trials list.
Well,
And as the team kind of grew, we also picked up Slay and Seiko, names that we still see
yeah.
nowadays. So, well, Slay and Seiko even still being on Exo right now. So, but yeah, it just started from there. We grew very, very quickly. We almost instantly during that meta became one of the top teams, even within tier 3. So it just all went uphill from there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems to have been quite the quick rise as well. I mean, like looking at you guys now, I mean, some of the names that you have on that, I have a few of them here, like Shockwave, KSAA, Kelix, Seiko, as you said. I mean, these are massive names in the scene, and the results are showing. Like, you guys have finished the group stages now, 10-0 in the
Correct. Yeah.
Run It Back tournament.
Yep.
Top of the group, obviously. And then today, obviously, congratulations with the win against Shoes Money Crew in the playoffs. So, could you talk to me a little bit about how the Run It Back experience has been?
Like, performance wise for our team, it's been pretty decent. Not as good as B-sides, actually. Mostly due to like the struggle with 4 of our players being on nobles in Saudi E-League, that being KSA, Shockwave, Seiko, and Slay. So they're currently residing over in Saudi Arabia, where they're playing with like 80 to 100 ping, so that's also
Okay.
affecting us negatively. And also just the meta. It's also a very different meta at the moment, very, very flexible meta. And yeah, that's just like for our performance wise, that's just how it's been so far. Could be a lot smoother, but we're still handling it pretty well. Administration and format wise, it's been somewhat of a mess.
Okay.
Um, the biggest example being the fact that we more often than not mentioned that we really disliked playing 3 matches in a single day during A or B sides or both. And then the first thing we got to see about the format is that we now have to play 2 days with 3 matches, which was really, really frustrating. And it was very visible within the Contenders Discords. But yeah, at that point, there's nothing they can do about it, or nothing they want to do about it, because
Mm.
it's that close to the tournament. So
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of pressure on players to play 3 matches 2 days in a row. Like it's it's a
just
serious commitment as
just
well.
yesterday, actually, our players, well, the ones that were in Saudi E League, they were playing from 12:30 all the way till 10:30, so that's 12 hours.
Jesus.
Because they also had to play 2 round robins in Saudi E leagues. Now we
Wow.
can't blame contenders for that, obviously,
Yeah.
but it's still very, very unfortunate.
It's unfortunate. It's tough going as well though, and I feel like the format on say contender side of things are not making things easy either. So um, it's a little bit tough, all right. On this whole kind of formatting and things like that, during the A sides, I believe it was, we had the EU contenders got a lot of attention with the contender strike.
Yeah.
Um, Now EXO were very involved in this in the lower bracket. I believe it was you and was it O1 Esports?
Oh, one esports, yeah.
Yeah, made the agreement to not play the match. Um, could you speak about maybe some of the issues behind the scenes that kind of brought us to that unfortunate situation?
Well, for those that are like not aware of what happened, basically O1 versus
Was it Munich Esports?
I think, yeah, O1 versus Munich
Yeah.
Esports was supposed to be a first to three, but on various like points, like on their Game Battles website and probably also on the Discord somewhere, it was listed as a first to four.
Okay.
So I think, was it Munich was up 3-0? Yeah,
Yeah.
Munich was up 3-0. O1 was starting to make a comeback, going all the way to 3-1, 3-2. And at that point, Blizzard calls for a halt and admits that it was a mistake and it was supposed to be a first to three. So Munich would have won 2 maps ago. Obviously, that completely kills the comeback like scenario for O1.
Yeah.
And they were immediately sent to the lower bracket after, like, well, some complaining going around everywhere. And we just kind of mutually agreed to just not play. Like, obviously, between the time of them being told they lost and us starting our map, it took like half an hour of just people in the discords continuously complaining and trying to get Blizzard's attention, etc. And we also at some point ended up in a Discord call with, I believe, like 50 people, all like players, staff, admins, everyone just completely going crazy
Yeah.
towards Blizzard's, trying to like justify that the match should have continued at that
Mm.
moment. It should not have been halted whatsoever. And Blizzard ended up realizing that and agreed to it. But at that point, like the comeback was just
Yeah.
not possible anymore. Like the momentum was gone. So it was very unfortunate for O1 at that point. And also during the time where EXO and O1 decided not to play anymore, I mean, we all saw the clips of us just holding Torb 1v1s. But at that moment too, we were also threatened with basically just forfeiting our maps and basically also our prize pool. But we were both fine with sacrificing that if that was needed. And I was very lucky at that time that our graphics designer was available to create a graphic for us, because the second that popped up, I was like, this is like, if there's any chance for us to go public about this, now's the time. There wouldn't have been any other time for us to go public about this and hopefully like get them to change their ways of dealing with things.
Mm.
So
It's unfortunate then when, I asked you about the run it back experience, it seemed to be, I wouldn't say overwhelmingly negative on the admin side, but definitely not the change that you wanted post A sides.
correct, yeah. There
Okay.
have been like some things where they've improved, but they're just being overshadowed by like the newer negative things being implemented. It's a never-ending cycle.
So what are some of the changes then you feel are necessary if we wanted to develop this in the correct direction?
Um, Currently, the biggest issue is that we don't really have um, optimal ways to provide feedback to Blizzard in general. We have like one text channel where everyone can just drop their feedback in there, and we tend to just get like the response, like the basic reply of we'll look into it or we'll keep that into consideration for next tournament. And by then they've probably already forgotten about that provided feedback, so it's kind of out the window. They've also, I don't know if it was before or after A sides, told us that there would be meetings with contenders representatives, like team representatives, to kind of go over like feedback in general, like what would we like to see from contenders and what do they think is best for contenders, and then mutually agree on something. But that hasn't happened after A sides. It hasn't happened after B sides. Um, it has occurred, like it has been mentioned in the contenders discords today, actually. So I'm hoping that they follow through with it.
Yeah, I think that would be seemingly very necessary for the current situation.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, I don't want to like fully bash on Blizzard. I do know that they haven't really had the chance to fully adapt to their new environments because most of them are pretty new, and due to past like circumstances, they haven't really been able to learn and adapt to how contenders used to be in the past and
okay.
what they actually could do. Like they haven't had the chance to look at previous contenders and say and like see, oh yeah, this was actually pretty good. Maybe we can try this again. They've been just kind of thrown in there and
Okay.
yeah,
I
been given
see.
a good luck.
Yeah, that's a again, it's just an unfortunate situation, I think, for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Another thing that's kind of on the horizon that I'm still kind of in two minds about is this idea that L teams are going budget. Seems to be the rumor at the moment. Now, presumably, this is going to have a knock-on effect on tier two. Then, and in my opinion, the talent coming up from tier three. Um, Obviously, there's not enough spaces in the Overwatch League for all of these amazing talent that we have. These veterans,
Mhm.
generally, you're going to see them go to tier two as opposed to see some maybe rookies come up from tier three. Is something like this avoidable? And is it going to be as big of an issue as I think it is, or is this good for the scene to see these veterans in tier two? Does it get more support? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think I'm not like personally too invested in like researching Overwatch League and all of that stuff because I most likely am just not going to get there myself.
Okay.
I also don't have the goal to do it. But it doesn't surprise me that like all teams are lowering or trying to preserve budget here and there. But speaking EU, we're already at a disadvantage anyways. Like talking visas, talking just well, I
Mm,
think mainly visas. Like the main reason why our teams don't pick up EU players. But on the other hand, like teams parting ways with current OWL players and then them going back to contenders, I think that's just bound to happen at that point. Like I don't know what's gonna happen. I guess for the sake of contenders, I hope that it's gonna build a more competitive contender scene.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure it will, despite the previous owl mixes that just end up failing in contenders, which we've also seen in the past. But if you look at like Peps or I guess EXO at this point too, like they are pretty much owl mixes and they are
Yeah.
doing pretty well. So hopefully we can flip that around and actually get some good mix going in there. But I don't know in what direction it's gonna go. I'm just hoping that at some point they decide to pick up more EU talent
Yeah,
because
yeah. No, I think we speak for most EU people when we say we just want to see more EU talent in the
yeah.
league. You know, it was just fantastic to see some of the guys on Paris and on London pop off. You know, so big props to them, especially. So okay, that's enough with the big picture stuff. Then I want to talk a little bit kind of grassroots managing again. Um, so when it comes to building a roster, what are some of the key things you look for first?
I wouldn't even say that you are the one looking for stuff. Unless if you don't have a coach, then you need to find one,
Okay.
definitely. Um, if like, I guess if you don't have a coach, but you do want to get a roster already, because there's also this scenario where a coach won't join your team unless you have a roster. In that case, either I hope that you have some knowledge of players, and or you can just hold open tryouts. I guess that's also like a thing you could do. But if you don't have any knowledge of like skill, if you don't know if someone's good or bad, then you're not going to get anywhere. So you need to find someone or be the person that knows about performance and just try and fill the roster that way. But personally, I would say try and find a coach that's willing to build a roster with you and see from there, because just one opinion alone isn't going to cut it. And at some point, once you get like, say you're like part through the tryout phase and you've decided to already pick up one or two players, consult them as well. They will know better than you or possibly even the coach. So,
Very good. That's interesting. So uh, in terms then of development, so that's talking about picking up the players, but in terms of development, in and out of the server, then how much of that responsibility would you feel the manager should take on, and how much is it of the coach's responsibility?
um, I think it's primarily the coach's responsibility. But as a manager, you're kind of allowing them to uh, like do their job basically. Whether it's like booking the right scrims, like consulting your coach and finding a way to say, okay, we'd rather scrim this team and that team, whether it be due to like skill level, because the team you're trying to scrim is just better than yours or the best you can scrim, or sometimes it's even worth like scrimming a lesser performing team if the comps that they play are comps you need to practice against. Um, Other than that, I think um, if your coach wants to hold coaching sessions, which include like comms, having you record them would also greatly benefit your coach. And also just in general, attending scrims. Like
Mm.
there might be moments you could pick up on, even if you don't feel like you're capable of handing notes. Anything could help. Like if you say, "Oh, I've noticed that this player has been quiet recently," you can relay that to your coach, and perhaps he can have a talk with that player.
Yeah, so that kind of brings me down to where I wanted to go next, was just in terms of like the mental well-being of your players. Like, how do you ensure that they are taken care of? And I think to a greater extent that they're taking care of themselves. Um, what role would you have in that?
Um, Currently, it's been kind of like, as much as I'm against it or how it shouldn't be, basically right now, is that like the majority of players don't really take it all too serious. That being like mental well-being, but they are like most of the time they're capable of keeping their own mental health and mental well-being in check. So they should be fine in that regard. Like they're old enough to maintain it as they should. But the least we can do is like just keep them in check. Like suggest things that they can do. Like currently, our coach just often recommends that they go to bed early, especially now in Saudi because they're
Mm,
2 hours ahead.
yeah,
Um, so when we have like a 21-23 scrim, that's actually like 11 p.m. till 1 a.m. for them.
yeah,
So
wow,
then our coach will literally try and basically force them to go to bed instantly after. But we all know that that's not possible. But
yeah, of course.
it's the least we can do. Other than that, there isn't really much we can do, I think, unless like they actually have like problems. But then you just, I guess, if there's one thing you can do as a manager is try and keep your relationship with your players as like comfortable as possible for them, so that they can reach out to you if there
Mm,
ever is something, which then also includes you checking up on them and trying to see like, hey, are you doing fine? Like, is everything okay? Is there anything you need? How have you been feeling, etc., etc.? Which I guess could also be done in the form of an anonymous like feedback
yeah,
thing, like a form where they can just like in case they're not comfortable with saying it by
yeah,
voice or through a text chat, it's still there and they have the opportunity to do so
that's
without
very
having
good.
to write you a DM.
Yeah, that's very good. Actually, I wouldn't have considered that kind of anonymous thing in the team. That's very very smart actually. Um, so in terms then of team culture, how important do you feel? Well, I suppose first and foremost, how important do you think it is to have a constructive, say, team culture inside of your team? Like, is that something that you would kind of put on very heavily yourself, or do you think allow it to develop itself and see what pops out?
Well, in this case for EXO, it kind of like developed on its own because most of the players have been friends anyways. And I think that's gonna happen for quite a lot of like contenders teams, or maybe even tier three teams as well. Because what you see is that most teams are just it starts off with friends. They want to create a team together, and then they just try and fill in the gaps. Like they try to find a manager, try to find a coach, try to find the rest of the roles that they need. And so the culture like instantly starts there, and it's just gonna progress that way anyways. Like you end up befriending the other players that you picked up afterwards, and you just um, get into your own groove basically. So I don't think
Very
there's
good.
much you can do as a
Yeah,
manager.
that's fair enough. Yeah, I was gonna again ask then, how much do you think you influence the culture? Then, do you think you have any influence on it at all, or do you think it is just sort of player ran?
Oh, it's definitely player ran. EXO's definitely player ran. But back in like the older versions of EXO, I was a lot more involved in terms of like trying to keep the culture going, and like I don't know. Right now, I'm just more focused on like trying to keep it more professional, especially because of how like frustrating it is currently to like kind of be contenders.
Mm,
So like trying to keep the fun in it going is like a bit of a challenge, but we're like in our Discord server, we're having fun, and that's
yeah,
like the most important thing.
of
So
course, of course.
especially
Um,
the players.
yeah, and I mean, looking at results, like successful results seem to come quite easily for EXO, and touch wood, hopefully that continues for the next little while. Um, but what would you define then as, say, success for the team? Do you think these results are what you're looking for, or are there other metrics for success?
I think our coach would definitely say that we're doing fine, but we could do a lot better. And I think I agree. I think the players agree too. We're pretty satisfied now, for example, with our run it back performance, but there's always room for improvement. Like we could have avoided the two map losses versus Raspberry. We could have gone for cleaner runs where we don't lose certain points. But it will always be that way. You'll never be satisfied with your performance, and I think that's a key motivator, anyways.
Mm,
So it's good that that's there. But also like the players are obviously aiming for not only the cash behind the tournaments, but also the opportunity of getting Overwatch League tryouts,
yeah,
which is very slim at the moment, but it's still there. So there will always be key motivators for them, and that's going to define their success as it goes outside of practicing lots and lots. And of course, because they are such a great group of friends, then I think just them having fun, like
yeah,
not being demotivated or being burnt out, that is like another big part of success.
brilliant. So something you touched on really earlier on the interview there was Overwatch League wasn't a goal of yours. So to summarize, then what are your goals for the future?
Um, I've been saying this for a very long time now, but EXO has been or still is a ride or die thing for me. So as long as I have time and motivation, I'm gonna keep running EXO and EXO only. There have been like side projects here and there where like I help out some people that like reach out to me or like just literally tell me, hey, if you want to attend a scrim here and there and see how we're doing and possibly give feedback, then yeah, I'll do that sometimes. Like, I tell them in advance I won't be able to devote much time to them, but I appreciate them asking it,
Yeah.
and I'll try. I'll definitely try to. But so EXO kind of like has been the one and only full time project I want to work on. And back when we retired in July 2021, I thought that I could leave Overwatch behind me and that was going to be the end. And then almost exactly 1 year later, Slay pulls me back in, telling me they need a manager for their team, which is going to replace the British Hurricane spot.
Wow.
So I actually didn't hesitate twice, and I instantly accepted the offer.
Brilliant.
And other than that, like in terms of Overwatch, before I retire again, I just want to see the scene improve like by tenfold. I like my main focus at the moment isn't even our performance, because I, as much as I've said throughout the interview that a manager can affect the performance of a team, I know that I'm already doing like almost as much as I can do with the time I have, but I want to put a lot more time into improving the contender scene in general, which is why we've been like, our coach and I have been putting in hours in writing paragraphs of texts and trying to set up like conversations with Blizzard admins, and that's what I want to keep doing now. Like, I really want to help the scene improve.
Brilliant. Yeah, look, that's exceptionally honorable. Like, I think it's just something that hopefully we will see in the next little while. I'd love to see it roll out before the next Contenders tourney and see these improvements in real time. But it is great to see that there's people like yourself and your coach, and I know a handful of others that just have this goal where we just want to see an improvement in the scene tenfold. It definitely, I
Yeah.
think, is a great way of explaining it. Kev, before I let you go, have you any final words?
No, not really, but thank you for having me on this interview. It was pretty fun. It's been nice to air my heart out, I guess, about contenders.
Look, it's been
Yeah.
great. It's a pleasure having you on. I'm honored now. I get to speak to so many great people as well. I've enjoyed doing this myself, so it's been very good that way. Okay, we're going to leave it there. That's going to be episode 3 of the Overwatch interview series. This will be live on Sunday, so give it another 7 days. We'll have episode 4 ready for you then. Take care.